Hello. Welcome.
Yeah.
Quick show of hands,
All right.
how many people have been to El Salvador ever? Woo! Okay.
Nice.
New show of hands, how many people have heard of El Salvador before
A year ago.
this time last year? No way. I don't believe any of you. El Salvador is like the smallest country in Central America, one that I had barely ever known anything about until I got wrapped up in the Bitcoin project. So, welcome everybody, let's talk.
Well, welcome to this new panel. I think it's one of the few panels about El Salvador, so it's one of the hot topics right now in the Bitcoin space. We had the chance to meet together in La BitConf last year. Yes, yep. I'm the mod of this event. I lead La BitConf conference, which is the longest running Bitcoin conference in the world and the most influential one in Latin America. And with me, yes, I have my three big players in the space of El Salvador. They were the key aspect of actual implementation of the Chivo wallet or the Bitcoin implementation in the region. So I wanted to start eventually this talk. Yes, each of you can introduce briefly, but I would like to get your thoughts about how this impacted Salvador, how this was a good thing or not. Yes, and which is the outcome of the decision that Nayib Bukele took in the last 7-8 months.
I mean, I think, well, let me begin if I may. Bitcoin has been an amazing introduction to El Salvador. El Salvador was, and still is, a small country in Central America. Not very many people visit it. Low amounts of tourism, an economy that has, for the last 20 years, grown 2-3%, which, starting from a small base of only a few $1,000s of GDP per capita, is a really slow, agonizingly dismal pace. Many of the people of El Salvador, when they reach working age, they try to come to the United States. A lot of their working population is actually here in the United States, and they send remittances back. Since Bukele announced at this conference that they would be making Bitcoin legal tender, the government's projections say that the economy is growing at over 10% per year, which is phenomenal. They've never had double-digit GDP growth. Yeah. It's come from tourism. It's come from investments. It's come from just a general spirit of our country is on the right track, which is so powerful. Yeah. I think we often forget that in the United States, that people feeling that their country is on the right track is a very powerful motivator. It makes you want to invest, not just in businesses, but invest in yourself. And I think that's been a really powerful thing to see happen in El Salvador.
This word, because one of the things I felt when I was there is people need to believe that things are changing, because changes take time, but you need to believe that things are occurring and will change in good. And that's what you feel when you speak in El Salvador. No? You feel that people, it's not already everything done, but they're on a good road coming from 30 years of.
Right. I mean, it's not a utopia. I don't think it will, that's a long way away. But it's a growing growing country. The economy is growing. I think the government did a very good job with vaccination and health, and I think that they've done a very good job of rolling out this new legal tender. The only place in the world where Bitcoin is legal tender. And I think we're now forgetting how impactful that was going to be when it was announced last year. I mean, that was world-breaking news. So I think the fact that there's only a few slots here at this conference talking about El Salvador, I think is a little bit of a shock, because I think it's the most important story in Bitcoin adoption. Not Bitcoin adoption of DeFi and all of these other things, which are, some of those projects are great, but really about people using Bitcoin. The thing that we have been hoping to use Bitcoin, I have for 10 years. You can go into a store, you can go into Walmart, in El Salvador and pay in Bitcoin. And I think that's really amazing.
And you had the experience of doing this, no? You went, I mean, it's one of the first things you do when you go to El Salvador, you want to pay with Bitcoins. It's strange, we want to hold Bitcoins, but we anyway want to pay in Bitcoins in El Salvador. So, but what's the experience about going down to El Salvador and
I want the experience of going into any Walmart, going into Starbucks, going into McDonald's, Wendy's. Even the second you get to the airport, you can pay your Visa. They have a big, a sign that says "Chivo, pay in Bitcoin."
And the taxes, the tourist taxes in the airport, you can pay them with Bitcoin. Also.
Everything. You talked about tangible impact for people as well, right? They were able to see that direct, tangible impact right away. I know Eric talked about at the LA BitConf, there were like 4 million people on the Chivo wallet. If you just do the math on the banked population in El Salvador, it means that 3 million of them never had a bank account before, which means that the impact that they got to see the day that this was launched was for the first time in their life they held an account balance somewhere. And by the way, that account balance was in Bitcoin, right? So, a couple of really good impacts there. And again, in terms of direct impact to people, there's more people using the Chivo wallet every month than using the entire rest of the financial system in El Salvador.
Well, if you think about it, yes.
It is.
From an infrastructure perspective, it's easy to see, kind of you mentioned Naib's approach to progressing the country. I mean, there are countries that invest money into infrastructure like roads and hospitals, and that has obviously been done in El Salvador. And there's a new type of infrastructure, which is a financial global economy connection infrastructure. And as the first country to legalize Bitcoin as a tender, and the first ever government-backed Bitcoin wallet to be able to power that and enable the entire country to interact in this currency. It's an infrastructure that people are being given the opportunity to become financially literate, digitally first. Digitally first, financially literate.
But in a country aspect, yes, you're changing the narrative, you're changing. People started to talk about you because of good things, because of technology, because of potential, and not because of the things that sadly Salvador is going through right now. Yes, with new intentions of raising contingencies, problems.
This actually helps with that to create a trajectory of in 10 years. We're going to see a different country because of it. Every day we see people turn 18, they get their bonus, they come on Chivo for the first time, they have a wallet, they're literate, they're going on a different trajectory than, honestly, the world, but particularly the country's ever gone on.
Okay, so Naib and Salvador showed that Bitcoin, as it has been at the beginning, like a good strategy to sell yourself, hey, we're going on Bitcoin, it also became a good strategy for a country to say, hey, we're jumping in Bitcoin, and this really attracts investment and attracts stuff, no? So I think it was a good move in that sense.
I think it was a good move. I think it was an aggressive move. I think the schedule
was tight.
I'll use that word. Thank you. There were a lot of sleepless nights. There were a lot of airplanes full of ATMs being imported into the country. But they rolled it out, and on September 7th, millions of people had access to try to download the wallets and to use the ATMs. And since September 7th, Athena has done, or Chivo ATMs have processed over 1 million transactions, and that's in a country of 6 million people.
Yeah.
So just most active Bitcoin ATMs in the world.
So it seems everything nice, yes, but doing this in a full country, not in a small city, not in a sandbox, as several likes to do. Doing this in a full country, it's not only a political complexity, yes, but it's a technical complexity. And thinking, yes, Lightning is for everyone and we should all go into Lightning, it's also a complexity. So why don't we discuss briefly which were the big complexities, the big challenges on going into a Bitcoinized or Chivonized.
The biggest challenge that we had really was, of course, initially the speed at which everything was done, it was done. We will be ready on this timeline, and then somehow figure out a way to make it happen. And so, as Eric said, a lot of sleepless nights. And from our perspective of integrations, integrating with the legacy financial system has been critical from the very beginning in looking at the success of Bitcoin in the world, right? As a real tool to facilitate transactions in the world, we have to integrate with ATMs, we have to integrate with traditional banks, we're integrated with all the national banks, the central bank, processing credit card transactions, expanding our reach and the user experience, ease of use.
But with the benefit of banks being willing and open to needing to do so, no? Or yet a bit of...
I'm not usually the advocate for government intervention. Stop laughing. But I will say that having a government that's supportive, that passes a law that requires in many ways banks, but also major retailers and other businesses to accept Bitcoin was a major force in, okay, we're going to go do this, it's going to happen, it is not a wait and see type of environment, it's just happening. And I think that was like one of the interesting things about working with the government. I think a lot of us got into the world of Bitcoin to overthrow governments. Mm-hmm. And then now we're government contractors. So all of us are government contractors now. And then, I think for Justin that's natural, but like for me it's like very unnatural. Like I am not a government contractor. I'm here for smaller government or no government.
So this is legacy integration. Yes, it's legacy. So legacy institutions also need to work on this integration, bridging. But there's been technical concerns, technical complexities. One of the other things beyond even technical is identity stuff. No, and you work actively on that issue. You came with a bunch of scrap identities. You need to work on that.
Yeah, by the way, hi everyone. I'm Justin. I'm the founder and CEO of NetKey. We do identity, KYC, AML work for people in the crypto space. Honestly, so all of us were so excited about the topic here, I think we forgot to introduce ourselves. What we worked on with the Chivo project was really around coming in to help out with identity and onboarding a little bit after the launch to help resolve issues there. There were really kind of four things that were challenges that we needed to face and deal with there. One was really around, inclusivity. So ensuring that we're speaking to people in their native language, that we're dealing with skin tones that are different than my skin tone with our biometric software in fair and good ways and things like that. Scale, as everyone's talked about here, scale was a huge issue. So to give people an idea, Chivo onboarded as many people in 45 days as Coinbase did in their first 3 years in business, or 3.5 years in business. So it was a massive onboarding effort. In the peak hour, we onboarded about 100,000 people, which again, there's not been a project in the industry that's had that kind of scale requirement before. And then, the other two pieces that came up is fraud prevention. Not surprisingly, when you're giving away free Bitcoin, there's people that would like to get it who may not be entitled to it. And so there was a lot of attempts of using people's identities who it wasn't their identity. And that was a massive part of the project, was ensuring that there was integrity around that part of the process. And then finally, and this is something that in crypto, all of us that are in crypto, except for those of us that have taken the time to be entirely no KYC Bitcoin, which I know some of us here have, the rest of us have probably been through KYC 100 times. Much of it digital, but some of it going to banks and opening accounts. Again, 75% of the population of El Salvador had no bank account. So they'd never been through any KYC process before, none at all. And so creating a process that was going to be easy and intuitive for them to do at home with their cell phone, having never been through that before, was also critical.
So many times when we think on a project, we think on the tech side of the project, on the development side of the project, and not in the human side of the project. No? And your thoughts and your understanding was on the human side of how they relate. It's not UX, it's the human side. the aspect. So it's very relevant. But
no, and it's a user experience for people that don't have experience being users of financial service products.
Yeah.
That was a very big challenge. And just to build on that, just building a company in El Salvador, a tech company. I think Athena's office in El Salvador is probably our biggest office. Our largest headcount is now in El Salvador. It's difficult to build a tech company in a country that has 1 or 2 tech companies.
Yeah.
And like that was one of our big challenges.
You had to bring everyone from outside.
Well, there was a lot of people from outside. There's a lot of just like, how do we hire a staff?
So when we start this and eventually Nayib thought, I mean, you can think all the nice things you would expect to have, yes, but you also have this time. I mean, you need to do it in 3 months or you put some pressure on the timing. And you leave things outside and inside. So it's a decision. I mean, it's not like everything it's flowers and stuff. So lots of challenges and things needed to be solved. Your case, for example, after the launch, they started working a bit deeply on identities.
Yeah, we came in a little bit after, I think Alpha Point did as well, and it's definitely fun. We're running with a moving target, and
exactly.
Reconnecting with that and dealing with it at scale. Yeah.
So legacy identities. Technically, Lightning Network. I would like to know. Was Lightning Network ready for getting? Because companies, 5 million people in 1 week. No, Lightning. 5 million transactions in 1 week. I mean,
Chivo is the first institutional use of Lightning. I mean, before there was Chivo, there's a subset of people using Lightning, and it had validation, let's say POC type of things, but the scale at which transactions flow and need to execute and need to be collateralized, and the different nodes and connections that need to be established for that to work on a national scale. No less, not only is Chivo the first national Bitcoin wallet, it's the first national Lightning wallet, it's the first government-based wallet. There are a lot of things, and specifically relating to your question about Lightning, it went through kind of an accelerated version of all the challenges that Bitcoin's gone over the past multiple years and crypto integrations overall.
And that pressure makes things change also, no? When you really pressure the platform, when you really pressure the nodes, then you realize you need to change it, you need to upgrade.
No, and I think from a Lightning perspective, I think the Lightning developers have done great work over the last, I don't know how long they've been working, 5, 6, 7 years. But I do think that there wasn't 1 million people trying to use Lightning every morning to either buy a cup of coffee or to get on the bus or do anything else. And this user base of 5 million users now really is testing a lot of Lightning. Can I run my own node? If I do run my own node, how do I get connections to it? How does this work? There's a lot of questions that are raised when you run Lightning.
Even though it's fake to believe that everything is happening on Lightning, yes, much of it is happening on the Chivo itself, on the Chivo dollars, on the Bitcoin side, yes, and once you go outside, it has to do with Lightning. But actually, it's being we say this is not a sandbox, but for the world, it's sort of a sandbox of what can happen. I mean, if we would have US doing this with 45 billion people, it's impossible. Not 45, but 450.
I think we've just seen that. Everyone was like, oh, Russia is now going to use Bitcoin to evade sanctions. But the answer is actually that Bitcoin is not big enough to absorb Russia.
Yeah.
Bitcoin has absolutely been big enough to absorb El Salvador.
But we are understanding that now we need to move on to these scale projects. No, because this example is an example for us to understand and believe that what we thought, yes, eventually we will have a company.
Sure. No, and we figured out what scales. Chivo is mostly inside its own database. It does communicate without the outside world, which is so vitally important. It has to be on chain. It has to be on Lightning. It has to interact with physical paper currency. It has to interact with the legacy banking system, with Visa and MasterCard. I mean, those are all of the places where
discrete wallets to have access to the general Bitcoin network at any point.
So the Chivo ecosystem is so amazing because we did roll out something that touches all of those things.
Well, and let's also be really fair. Chivo is only a part of the El Salvador Bitcoin and Lightning ecosystem, right? There's one thing that Chivo does exceptionally well compared to almost anyone else down there, which is connect in and out to the banks and the rest of the financial system and things like that. But many of the Salvadorans I know have 2 wallets. Or 3 wallets, and one is, one will be non-custodial or unhosted or at least outside of the government. And all of those transactions are happening back and forth over Lightning and using Lightning, and many people are definitely using that every day, and the government's encouraging that, right?
That's one of the good things.
When I saw the Chivo Pets, so they opened a pet hospital in El Salvador, where if I go in and I have my dog operated on, if I pay in dollars, I pay the full price. If I pay in Bitcoin, the entire visit, including taking the medicine home, surgery, everything, is 25 cents if I pay in Bitcoin. And it's not if I pay with Chivo. It's if I use any Bitcoin wallet to pay. And so, the government down there, while they've built a Chivo wallet that's the basis and the starting point for what's happening down there, they also understand the need for a robust ecosystem, for interoperability between wallets. It's one of the reasons that they built a Lightning system instead of, El Salvador Venmo.
And if we compare this with China, for example, Bitcoin, but finally, no Bitcoin, the e-yuan and everything inside that, and this was very open.
It's beautifully open.
We're going into Chivo, yes.
No, it's very beautifully open.
But it's open to everyone.
I think that's what makes it so amazing. It's open. They've built a system that allows for interconnectivity, so it's open, so every Bitcoin exchange in the United States is now a remittance platform for El Salvador. So if you do want to use Coinbase or Gemini or any of the other US exchanges, Kraken, I think you're out there in the audience. So if you want to use those platforms, you can buy Bitcoin, send them to your relatives who have either a Chivo wallet or some other wallet. They could have the Galloy wallet, and so they can use those, and they can go to the ATMs, and they can withdraw cash, or they can keep a balance, or they can go shop and Walmart and Super Selecto and Pollo Campero.
I'm happy that you mentioned it because from our perspective of powering the first national Bitcoin wallet, of course we see a trend. Other countries around the world should be and are, thankfully, looking at integrating with the global crypto economy, whether it's Bitcoin or any other currency. And when we look at what those implementations will look like, of course, we're leading it in El Salvador, and we anticipate to lead it in multiple countries as new laws come out. At least from a bright spot perspective of they see that there is fair and equitable transactions in an open economy. It's not a closed kind of bank system. It's still retaining the heart and soul of the Bitcoin ethos, and integrating to legacy systems, and people that never had access to this type of infrastructure have it for the same offerings as Bitcoin had from the very beginning. It's a free wallet. Anybody can create it. Anybody can move money from anywhere in the world, and the only limitation is internet. Right? And so just as people in the beginning of internet kind of were introduced to this, we're seeing in El Salvador, people are being introduced to Bitcoin as they were internet, but imagine that it's, every day somebody has a free connection to internet, in the 2001 internet era. So this infrastructure, as it develops into, expands as Chivo, and we as Alpha Point expand our integrations and our capacity to both exchange and facilitate payments, we can really see a world where multiple countries have really any denomination and can transact freely, openly, cleanly, and instantaneously.
So we're running out of time. We discussed if we would have done something different, yes, if we were to launch again, and well, we know the president launched this, no? But we saw all the problems, we saw all the critics. I mean, you need to be able to manage all the critics also as a president, no? But I ask you outside, would you do something different? Would you do it in the same way, no education, first at Bitcoin and then the education? I mean, how do you feel about the implementation? Would you agree that beyond the challenges, this was a good way of doing it?
The implementation itself, I think, it's beautifully structured. As we said, it's a beautiful product from the timeline perspective. If we had, maybe a few more days, it would have been helpful. Not staying up till 1 a.m. every night.
I don't know if that would have helped.
It's good.
There was only one way to do this, which was to do it fast. There are so many detractors in the world that want to take away our freedom, that do not want us to have Bitcoin. There is so much government overreach from our own government in the United States, but from world organizations. No, there's only one way to do this. It was fast. It was broad, and I think they went for it and they got it. And I think that's beautiful. I think that the president is a student of history. He understands that people understand when things are successes and they forget, a minor stumble here or there. That's not important. What's important is they are the only country that has Bitcoin as legal tender.
Justin?
Overall, I agree with that quite a bit. I would say if there's, maybe one thing I would have done different, I probably would have invested a little more upfront on education so that the populace was a little bit more prepared when it first came out. But I think a lot of that's...
I sort of disagree with that, because before you create the need, then they want to understand about it. If you start talking about Bitcoin, but it's so far, I don't know, perhaps tomorrow I will try to get understanding. Now you have it, now you need to go.
Best way to learn is to do.
Well, so before closing, first I want a big applause for Mirena, who's here, is the ambassador of El Salvador. And I think that what's missing to the bull, ¿cómo se dice toro? The bull.
Bull.
The
bull.
The financial bull. Outside, I think we all realize he's missing the titanium balls. Yes? I think that the balls of the bull are to be given to Nayib Bukele.
For sure.
Fair enough.
Steel balls. Bueno, that's it. Any question outside you can address.
If you support freedom, I ask you to do two things. One, buy the volcano bond when it comes up. It is going to support a government that is thinking differently and thinking about the Bitcoin community. And second, please write your congressperson. We need to free Ross.
Bueno,
thank you.
Let's take a picture of this.